Welcome folks, you're listening to the A Minute to Midnight show and my name is Tony. Today I have John Haller returning as a guest on the show, and recording this retrospectively I can say it's a really good interview, well worth the time to listen to it. And don't forget to visit our website aminutomidnight.com, and we do run this entirely by donations of course as well. It's my pleasure to welcome back to the A Minute to Midnight show John Haller, frequently returning guest on our show and always a great person to interview with so much knowledge. So thank you for being back on the show again today, John.
Good to be back with you again, Tony.
And as usual, we won't run out of things to talk about. I'm absolutely sure of that, John.
If it happens, one of us has been raptured. Or maybe both. I'm pretty sure about me, but you know.
Fair enough. Yep. Okay, so where did you want to take us today?
Well, I think one of the things we mentioned that we wanted to talk about a little bit was the internet censorship thing that's going on that seems to be affecting all of us that are Christian, evangelical, conservative, and the way we are the way we are getting shadow banned and in some cases outright blocked. I mean, of course, here in the United States, it's an interesting phenomenon of the way that they've done this. I think that there's a blog here in the United States called Powerline. It's by a number of lawyers, usually pretty well thought out, conservative oriented. And they had an article last week called How the Left is Outsourcing Censorship of the Internet. And so I think that's probably a good place to start. I mean, we know that the most common example thus far has been, or the most noted example has been the outright banning of Alex Jones from all sorts of media. Now, I'm not necessarily a fan of Alex Jones, and I think sometimes he hurts himself as much as anybody could just by letting him talk. I think he just has a tendency to go off and swerve off. But every now and then he does make some good points. But somebody's decided that he's dangerous or that he can't be heard, and so he's being blocked, not out. They've taken down his channel. They've taken down his. I think he might still be on Twitter. They've taken down his Facebook page, and they've just tried to go and outright block this guy from ever speaking. It's an interesting phenomenon. The usual response of everybody is, well, don't worry about it. It's not censorship. It's not a violation of free speech, but it is in a sense. I mean, it's clearly censorship. They say, well, they're not a government agency. They're just merely a private company, and a private company can block whoever they want from using their platform. Now, I have some fundamental problems with that. For example, they use the internet, which is essentially a publicly maintained pipeline. It's sort of a mix of private and public systems that put the internet together. In fact, I don't know who runs the whole thing, but it seems to run. But it really was originally put up by the government. And a lot of people started using it for commercial and profit. They've added their own servers and that sort of thing. But I think the basic structure is sort of a public or quasi-public entity. Therefore, when they're using the public, for lack of a better term, the public airways, the public pipeline, I'm concerned when private companies come in and try to censor everything that not everything, censor certain viewpoints. So Alex Jones being what some people consider to be conservative, he was one that could go. What the European Union did was they put out their hate speech code last year. All of the companies now have signed on to that, all the major internet companies, because they want to broadcast. They want to have their products, their services available in the EU, so they have to comply with the EU hate speech code. The problem is that in the United States, where we might have a more robust view of free speech and how that should operate, it effectively ends up blocking, because the companies don't distinguish between traffic that's solely US or solely European. They just say, well, the path of least resistance is we'll just go ahead and block hate speech, whether it's from the United States or Europe, and therefore we'll comply with the European Union rules. Well, that has an impact on us here. And I think this point that they make is very, very good in the Powerline blog. Let me just read like 2 paragraphs from it. Liberals control every newspaper in America, as far as I know, except the Manchester Union Leader. They control CBS, ABC, NBC, and every cable network except Fox News. They control what is left of the news magazines and pretty much every other magazine. Only talk radio and the pesky internet lie outside their grasp, but that is where they seek to impose censorship. But they have a problem, the First Amendment. The government can't suppress conservative speech on the ground that it is hate speech, something liberals don't like. And that was recently affirmed by a 9-0 decision of the Supreme Court. So liberals have outsourced censorship of the internet to the tech titans of Silicon Valley. And it's something that's very concerning to me. I see a company like Google. Google is putting together a censored search engine for China. Now, I don't think it's going to stay there in China. I know that China has set up a social credit score. I don't think that social credit score is going to stay in China. It's going to navigate around the world, and people like that run Facebook and other people in the tech titans of Silicon Valley here in the US, they're going to adopt these restrictive codes and social credit scores and that sort of thing, and therefore be able to block out or drown out conservative voices. So it's something that concerns me greatly. I know at Fellowship Bible Chapel, where I speak and teach each week, we have developed a number of alternative media outlets. Now, we don't really publicize those right now. We're still pretty much tied into YouTube, but we know that we figured that our days on YouTube are probably numbered, that at some point what we talk about will not be very popular. The social trends, the cultural trends seem to indicate that there is a rise of socialism, leftism, and with that, controlling thoughts and actions. And I've said this many times that the biggest fascists in the world very often are corporations. They're the ones that will do willingly what the government can't do in the United States. And so this is what the point of the Powerline blog last week is. They're just outsourcing censorship to these left-leaning organizations in Silicon Valley, the tech titans, Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Instagram, and those people go right along with it. And if you challenge them on it, immediately they'll say, well, oh no, we don't really do that. But I don't know if you've experienced it, Tony, but we've experienced a bit of a drop-off over the last couple of months in the views on our YouTube channel.
Well, I actually, yes, the numbers of the view numbers have definitely gone down. I wonder, though, whether the actual numbers of viewers have gone down or whether it's just the reporting of those numbers, because I've noticed that the viewer numbers are going down, but the number of likes on the videos are actually going up, not down. So to me, the numbers don't correspond with the number of likes. It's like, hang on a second, this doesn't add up. But that article you had in Power that you sent it to me in that Powerline blog. Yeah, just look, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and so on. Other players include Google, Apple, Pinterest, Spotify. All are run by leftists, or tech companies run by liberals. And it's definitely affecting all of us. In fact, WordPress has also knocked some people off, taken some people off WordPress recently, which our website is hosted on WordPress.com. So is the fireandfreedom.org website on that. So it's like, wow, even WordPress. And then I notice, people will say, oh, Patreon. Well, I have another article, here that says MasterCard has blacklisted Robert Spencer because of illegal content. MasterCard forces Patreon to blacklist jihadi watches Robert Spencer. And that was in Breitbart. And I think you might have sent me that article as well, did you?
I sent you that article,
yeah,
right.
well, I mean,
That's very concerning.
Yeah.
And in fact, this is a sort of the backdoor way that they're attacking the Second Amendment here in the United States, is that the big credit card companies are blocking access to sales of firearms. And so they're able to do indirectly what the government can't do directly. And I'm not sure whether this is really the people in our Congress and the House of Representatives and the Senate have grasped what's going on, whether the administration has grasped what's going on. But I see this happening with Robert Spencer at Jihad Watch, and just wonder, are we next? What are they going to do to us? And this is tied in very much, I think, to this social credit scoring that China has put in place with its people, and it's full blown. It is in place, and it's interesting. I know people have talked to people in China, and they're like, so really, what's the problem? They don't really understand what's at stake in this, because they live under a oppressive regime anyway. So I know that the state of New York, they've used the Islamists use a thing called lawfare. What they do is they go out and they sue people. They sue people repeatedly, even if there's not a legitimate basis for their lawsuit. The result of that, which is people have to spend money on attorneys, and being an attorney, I don't mind that. I will say that right off the bat. But it is expensive in litigation. Litigation is very expensive now. I have cases involving attorneys from big firms in New York and other financial centers in the United States, and their billing rates are, $1,000 to $1,200 an hour.
Wow.
It does not take very long for that, for any litigation to become incredibly expensive. It's having a huge impact on the way litigation is done here in the United States, because we follow a rule called the American rule that you file a lawsuit, you pay your own attorney, whether you win or lose. So the loser doesn't have to pay. Now, there might be some exceptions to that. For example, if you have a contract that says the prevailing party has to pay the prevailing party's legal fees, so in other words, you have to pay everybody's legal fees, that can be done by contract. But the general rule in American courts is that you pay your own attorney. So people know that. Sometimes they may be able to pump up their claim, and they'll get somebody to do it on what we call a contingency fee, where they would get a third or 40% of the recovery. That's often done in personal injury cases where people don't have that much money. They can't afford to bring lawsuits. So they get an attorney, and if they get a big settlement, the attorney gets 30% or 40% of the recovery. And that's how common people are able to get in court. But it does not take very long for that cost to just go through the roof. I mean, I know this from my own personal experience. If I work 10 hours in a day on a case, my client's going to get hit with a bill of $4,500. So what happens is, in the lawfare situation, is they bring these bogus lawsuits against you, and you end up essentially being bankrupted by the attorney's fees. This is something that's happening to this Masterpiece Cake Shop and Jack Phillips out in Lakewood, Colorado. He was brought up on charges before the Colorado Human Rights Commission, or whatever they call it, because he was not baking a cake for a gay wedding. He was able to get, I think it's Alliance Defending Freedom took his case on a pro bono basis. He didn't have to pay. They took it all the way to the Supreme Court, and they won. They won a 7-2 decision saying that he had been mistreated by the Colorado Commission. And so what's happened now? So not even 2 or 3 months after he wins that case, and the decision, by the way, was, from my view as a lawyer, was very weak. It was not very strong. It was, in my view, a very much a compromise decision that they said, okay, Jack Phillips, we're going to win, but we're not going to put in place any overarching controlling principles of law that you could rely on in the future. So what happened? Well, what happened would be what every good thinking lawyer would have known would have happened after reading that Supreme Court decision. Jack Phillips goes back. Somebody comes into his cake shop, and I think this might have even happened before the Supreme Court decision came down, but sometime around the Supreme Court decision, somebody came into his cake shop in Lakewood, Colorado, and wanted him to bake a cake that was either pink on the inside and blue on the outside, or vice versa, depending on which way they're transitioning in their gender identification. And he just said, I can't do that. I can't support that. I'll bake you a cake, but I can't do one that really sends a message that I fundamentally disagree with, or that goes against my religious principles. So now he's up on charges again in front of the Human Rights Commission in Colorado. And what he's been able to do now is Alliance Defending Freedom has come in, and they've filed another lawsuit to have that overturned. I mean, and so they're doing essentially what the Supreme Court just said that they couldn't do. But because the Supreme Court didn't issue a very strong decision, now Jack Phillips is being subject to consecutive lawsuits. And so until the Supreme Court puts a stop to it, this is going to continue. And left-wing organizations, they're well-funded. In fact, I'll give you an example while they're well-funded in just a minute. And so what they do is they will file these repeated lawsuits. I'll tell you how the left-wing organizations get well-funded here in the United States. It happened particularly under the Obama administration. In Ohio, the state of Ohio, where I live right now, one of the people running for governor in the election that's coming up in November is a guy named Richard Cordray. He, I think, made his name. He won some money on Jeopardy, and he went to law school, and he's worked in private law firms, and he's been in public agencies pretty much ever since. He was designated by Obama in the Obama administration to head up the Consumer Protection Financial Bureau, Consumer Finance Protection Bureau. And so in his ad, one of his ads says, I was so great. I went to Washington and I worked for the common man, and I recovered $12 billion from the big banks to go back to consumers. Well, very little of that money ever went back to consumers, because what the Obama administration does, and this is pretty well documented, they channeled that money, this $12 billion in this case, and it was billions in many other cases, to these left-wing nonprofit organizations that engage in lawfare and going after people. So the left has funded their lawyers with government money that should have gone back to consumers for bank fraud or whatever. And they're using it to fund these lawsuits. They're using it to fund lawsuits like somebody like Jack Phillips, or they have government organizations that are left-leaning that bring these lawsuits. And Jack Phillips, unless he can find a lawyer to do it pro bono, he's out of business. That happened to the bakery out in Oregon. They got hit with a judgment and they couldn't pay it, and they had to go out of business. So the Islamists and some of the Muslim organizations do the exact same thing. Whether they win the lawsuit or not is irrelevant. And effectively what it does is it has a very chilling effect. So if you're somebody like Jack Phillips or Robert Spencer, when you want to say something that might not be popular, it's true what they say or what they do, or it's a sincerely held belief. And so what happens is they want people to think twice before they say something like that. And that is effectively censorship. And it's a huge problem. And I don't expect it to go away anytime soon unless the Supreme Court would intervene and put a stop to it. But they had a perfect opportunity in the Masterpiece Cake Shop case recently and they just issued this very weak. They gave him a victory, but no basis for it. And as a result, there's no good law that comes out of that case, in my judgment. And we're going to go through the cycle again and again and again until maybe we get enough people on the Supreme Court that they will actually issue a decision that says something.
And of course, they have people like George Soros with lots and lots of money backing a lot of these groups as well.
Yeah, but as I said, they don't even necessarily need George Soros. They're using like the Obama administration was very clever at using public money, channeling it to their cronies. Yeah, I mean, it's a huge scandal, and I don't know. Well, I do know why it was never brought up, but it was never really brought up, and never really looked at that closely.
It's certainly the whole censorship thing is a big worry. I know it's plaguing a lot of our minds. You know, I get other people sending me things too, people with websites and, you know, WordPress blogs and different things and YouTube channels, and we're all kind of now in this position of wondering what the heck, you know, is going to happen, and what do we do, and how do you fight it, and how long are we going to be able to survive before we're all taken down in one way or another. And it's definitely, well, it's not going away, is it?
I don't think so. Now, look, you know, I don't want to look a gift horse in the mouth, because YouTube is, in many respects, it's a wonderful service. It's free. They put these videos up and they're there as long as they stay there, or they're not shadow banned or blocked. Let me give you one more example. Prager University, I don't know if you've heard of Prager University, but it is the largest, in terms of views, YouTube channel on planet Earth. This year, Prager University, PragerU, will get over 1 billion views on YouTube. They're far and away the largest channel. I mean, I think last year we did, on our church YouTube channel and some other outlets, we did about 2.5 million views, and we thought that's pretty good. So Prager's, you know, many, many times larger than we are. But they have 3 million followers on Facebook. Last week they tracked it. They put up 9 posts about videos that they have put up. And they're conservative, traditional values, they're good thinking. Their philosophy is, you give us 5 minutes, we'll give you a semester worth of information. Now, they're not a public university or anything. You don't get a degree. They don't have a graduation or a prom or anything like that. But they have good, well thought out videos. I mean, I don't agree with every one of them, but they're good thinking. They will help someone learn how to think and articulate ideas, particularly conservative, Judeo-Christian ideas. They put up 9 posts. They track those posts. They have 3 million followers on Facebook. 3 million. In a day, those 9 posts had 0 engagement. So they complained to Facebook, and eventually, even after 3 or 4 days, some of the posts only had 21 engagements. 20 out of 3 million. Yeah. It's not statistically possible, particularly with, I mean, these people, they put up a video, and I would say usually within 24 to 48 hours, it'll have 2 to 2.5 million views on almost every video that they put up. And you know, from someone who has a YouTube channel, those are huge numbers. Yeah. So Facebook, they put out a thing, and they said, oh, well, we made a mistake. We'll make sure that this doesn't happen again. Now, do you really believe that that's not going to happen again with Facebook and the people that are running Facebook? They're just going to try to be more clever the next time.
Yeah, and this is the biggest worry, though. It's not just Facebook, it's all of these tech platforms, as you mentioned right earlier on. And this is the thing, they're all controlled by, To be honest, I don't even like the word left wing because really, and people blaming everything on the left because extreme right is just as bad. You know, you look under Adolf Hitler and so on, and that it's still all socialism in one way or another. And so,
Right.
I think you know, when people always refer to the left, I think it polarizes people into this Hegelian dialectic sort of thing of the left and right. Basically, it's socialism in whatever form, and you know, nationalist, socialist, or Marxism, whatever it is, they all do the same sort of thing in the end to get their dictatorships in place, and they start with the censorship, and that's kind of what I'm seeing happening. And another thing, well, it is affecting us all, but there was another article, it's slightly off the track, but it's still to do with the whole socialist takeover and all of that. There was an article I saw was military atheist organization wants to imprison Air Force commander for his Christian faith. And the Military Religious Freedom Foundation lodged a formal complaint against Brigadier General E. John Tightshirt, who is a Christian and is a newly installed commander of the 412th Test Wing at Edwards Air Force Base in California. Anyway, the gist of it is they argued about his personal website, which is a Christian website called Prayer at Lunchtime for the United States. And it's nothing to do with the Air Force. This is his personal blog and so on. But the Military Freedom Foundation said on Monday in a press statement that he should be doing time behind bars, not commanding a wing wearing a general's stars. And then they said basically they branded him as a fundamentalist Christian tyrant and a religious extremist predator. You see, this is this hate speech kind of thing, and they
Right. And
talk
so what
about
they'll do
us.
to prove, they'll talk about him being a tyrant, and they'll prove that by being an even bigger tyrant.
Exactly. And isn't that just how, you know, it happens with this whole socialist thing? That's the way it happened under Hitler. It's the way it happened under Stalin. You demonize the opposition, and in the end, the real tyrants are the ones that are calling everyone else a tyrant.
Well, this is what, and I do listen to Dennis Prager. He's Jewish. He's not a Christian, but I think he's a good thinker. Again, I don't agree with Dennis on everything. I think he gets a little fuzzy on some issues, sometimes maybe a lot fuzzy. But he does stand for pretty much biblical Judeo-Christian values. He has a book out. He's writing a commentary series on the Torah. His book on the Exodus that came out last summer was a kind of a runaway bestseller. I mean, it's hard to believe that in this day and age, a book like that would do that, but it just shows that people are really hungry for good thinking biblical stuff. But his point that he makes very often, Tony, is the left usually projects. Whatever they accuse you of is what they're doing. And that's almost true 100% of the time. And then one of his other taglines is Germany and the left are almost always wrong. And it does seem to work out that way. So it is a very concerning thing that I see happening. I don't know how to stop it. I know people are fighting it, and so I think we just need to develop alternative platforms and that type of thing. Now, when you do that, of course, you know you're not going to get the reach that you get on YouTube if you separate yourself, because there's you know, the way that the logarithms work, there's kind of a synergy. You get more engagement, your page becomes more popular, it shows up in search engines. But, you know, like I said, I've had many emails I've gotten recently from people that say, are you still doing your videos each week? And I don't think I've missed a week, maybe 1 week in the last 3 years, if I failed to do one, a prophecy update. And they're just saying we were unsubscribed from your YouTube channel.
Yeah, I'm hearing that a lot.
So, and I don't know if they've put in some logarithm that if people don't like the video, then you're going to get you know, if you watch a lot of videos but you don't like them or engage in some way, leave a comment or something like that, then we're going to just unsubscribe you automatically. I don't know why it concerns them. But look, we also have to admit too, there are a lot of, well, I won't say a lot. There are Christian channels that have clearly pumped up their subscriber list and their views. YouTube has cracked down on this quite a bit. I mean, I know people out there that used to get, I'd look at their channel, they would get 100, 150, 200,000 views. Now they're getting 1,000.
Yeah.
And so part of that was because people were sort of gaming the system a bit and pumping up their views by getting fake number of subscribers. And so, I mean, so look, we'll get around 30,000 views each week on what I do, and we have about 25,000 subscribers. So I think, and we don't pump up our views, we don't push people subscribing or anything like that. But I see other channels with, 200,000 subscribers and, 2,000 or 3,000 views, and there's something that just doesn't match up there.
Exactly. In my view. Yeah, absolutely. And like I say, you can tell largely by the number of likes on a video too. When you have a video that's got 10,000 views and 1,500 likes, it's like, no, sorry, you don't get 1 in 8 people liking a video. That just doesn't happen.
No, those numbers do not. That doesn't match up to reality.
No, it doesn't. I mean, to have 1,500 likes, you've got to have had tens of thousands or even 100,000 plays, not 10,000 likes being reported. That sort of thing. In fact, I've even seen it when the play numbers and the like numbers are almost the same, and that's like, no, something is completely crook when this is going on. And yeah, I've noticed it. I've noticed it even with ours, and it's frustrating.
Well, it's interesting. That's something I've not noticed. So, for example, the one I put up yesterday it's been about 28 hours ago. It has 17,000 views, but it has 578 likes. That's a much higher number of likes than I was seeing in the recent past.
That's my point. If you go back to in the past, to have had 500 plus likes, you would have had a heck of a lot more than 17,000 views. And I'm noticing this on lots and lots of channels, which to me is showing that they're not reporting the true numbers of views.
Well, I guess that's encouraging and not encouraging, because they're throttling the view numbers.
Yep. Exactly.
Maybe they look into it and they think, how can this little church we're moving into a new building in a couple of weeks in Sunbury, Ohio. How can this little church of 100 people or so, 130 people in Sunbury, Ohio, be generating all of this traffic on YouTube? There must be something going on. But as I said, I've noticed the last couple of weeks that the number of likes on the channel have really gone up, but the views have really stayed stagnant to even dropping off.
And that is exactly the same thing that's been happening to us. Our videos tend to not get as many views as yours do anyway, but the point is that the same trend is happening. And I don't think it's just us either. I think it's, a lot of other places as well that I look at. And I look at the numbers, I kind of analyze them and think, nah, that doesn't add up, doesn't make sense. Particularly when you've been doing this for a few years and you realize the number of views it used to take to get a certain number of likes and so on compared to now. So it's crook.
Yeah, I guess that would be correct. So I'm just looking at another channel. It has almost the same number of subscribers. And here's a video with almost 250,000 views, and it has 2,000 likes.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. That's the way it once was when it was reality being reflected. But what that seems to be, they choose channels that they don't like, and for example, Christian channels that they suppress. They've got to, because the more the numbers look, then the more people go there. So the more they can make it look like, oh, that person's channel's not worth going to because they've only got X number of views, So
Okay,
it
so
stops something going viral.
yeah. So I have, I don't know what 17,000 is compared to 250,000, but it's at least 15 times more views. But I have 1/3 the likes on yesterday's video that they have on this video. It's roughly a year old.
Yep, exactly, and that's what I've been really observing, and I've been observing it on a lot of channels, including our one. So, yeah, we're certainly in difficult times where I think this is only the beginning. This is the problem. And what really bothers me is how few churches and things and people are doing anything about it or even care. It's just like people are so asleep to what's going on and nobody cares.
I don't know, Tony, if what's going on is if people are just tired of bad news, that they're losing hope, and so they just, they sort of let their, what I would call the normalcy bias, that, well, I'm not really seeing, for example, the other night in Sweden, they had these thugs running around setting cars on fire.
Yeah.
And I know this has happened I have friends who live in France, and this has been going on for years in France. And they've said that they've told me, I won't identify the city they live in. It's not Paris, but it's a very famous city in France. And they say if you call the police and say, hey, somebody set my car on fire, and this happens sometimes, hundreds of cars will be set on fire every single night in France. And it doesn't make the news anymore. And now if you call the police come, and if you describe someone who might fit into an immigrant category, people told me the police get in the car and they drive away. They don't even take a report. And so what you'll see is you'll see these people. There will be all these cars burning in Sweden just last week on one night. And people will act like, well, it didn't really happen because that's bad, so I'll just ignore it. It can't really be happening. Look at what happened at the car ramming that took place outside of Westminster Abbey, in not Westminster Abbey, but Westminster, near the House of Parliament in London just last week. People got run over by a car. Whether it was a terrorist attack or not right now, it appears somewhat to me to be a terrorist attack. But people got run over, and so the police come and they block off the bridge. And what was on the news, or what did you see? Everybody's running out taking a selfie of the scene of what's going on. And it's like, do you understand there was a terrorist attack right on the other side of the bridge, and you're taking a selfie at it? I mean, I have this vision of the apocalypse and the battle of Armageddon, the final and return of the Lord. And everybody's going to be there with their camera, taking a picture of it. I love golf, so I watched the PGA Championship, and where they had the championship in St. Louis last week. They had this long walkway that they had to walk over the crowd to get up to the clubhouse where they turned in their scores. And you looked at this, just thousands of people there, and it was like 50% of them were holding up a phone filming everything that was going on.
Yeah.
And half of what they had in their picture was probably other people taking a video with their phone.
Yeah. No, it's certainly a selfie generation.
It certainly is. Certainly is.
Yeah. Just going back to the sort of the socialist thing, I was looking with some interest at what's going on in South Africa at the moment, where the government is in the process of seizing land from white farmers. I feel sorry for people in South Africa. I really do. Whilst there's one particular person whose name is hard to pronounce, Ackerland Bordery, I think, wanted 200 million rand. That's $18.7 million for the land, but the government offered him just $1.87 million worth, or 20 million rand. But the notice that was sent to him is this: notice is hereby given that a terrain inspection will be held on the farms on April 5th, 2018 at 10 a.m. in order to conduct an audit of the assets and a handover of the farm's keys to the state. And that was the letter that was sent to them early this year. And South African government's pushing ahead with plans to amend their country's constitution to allow for the expropriation of land without compensation. And that was in news.com.au. And President Ramaphosa, who is the president in South Africa, had vowed to seize land from white farmers without compensation. And he said the expropriation of land without compensation is envisaged as one of the measures that we will use to accelerate redistribution of land to black South Africans, he said. And basically he's part of the ANC, which is the ruling party, the African National Congress, which is actually partnered with the South African Communist Party, which should say it all. But what's interesting to me is Cyril Ramaphosa, who is the president, is one of the richest men in South Africa and has an estimated worth of about $550 million.
Well, this is a perfect example of what we were talking about the normalcy bias, because a friend of mine posted on her Facebook page, Jackie Alnor, who runs Rapture Ready Radio. She posted something, or she said, I got a communication from somebody in South Africa that said all of this stuff about seizure of land and the murder of white farmers and all of this stuff it's overblown. It's just not really true. And then immediately there were a number of people who live in South Africa and they're saying, yeah, it is. It really is that bad in some areas. It's just not safe. And there have been, by the estimates I've seen, 8, 12, 15,000 farmers and their families. I mean, not killed. I mean, I'm talking about brutally slaughtered and seizure of their farms. So, and we don't even really talk about it. I mean, here in the United States, everything is consumed with Donald Trump's latest tweet storm, usually. And it completely overwhelms the news cycle, but all of this other stuff that's going on is just completely ignored. All of these various trouble spots in the world, what China's doing, Turkey, the continued situation in Syria, Russian weapon development. I mean, there are a whole host of things that are just completely ignored and hardly discussed. The only place that I can find these are good, solid, conservative, Judeo-Christian oriented places like Frank Gaffney's Center for Security Policy, securefreedom.org. They have they talk about this stuff, but by talking about it, they're running the risk of being banned by it. And this is even in a time when we have people supposedly in control who we think might be favorable towards us, but it doesn't seem to be carrying the day, does it? It seems like the situation is getting worse in terms of censorship and that sort of thing.
Yeah, it does. Yeah, and you have to wonder whether there are willing players there, which is the old sleight of hand trick. You pretend to be standing against something whilst at the same time you're doing nothing about it. What does that tell you? Does it tell you you're really against it, or are you just a kind of a puppet but standing there pretending to be something? Because nothing's really changed. It hasn't got better; it's gotten worse.
Right. So, and it does seem to be getting worse. One of the other articles I think I sent you that maybe we could talk about was an article by Michael Snyder at the Economic Collapse blog that was picked up by Zero Hedge, where he talked about, and the title of it is MIT Computer Model Predicts Dramatic Drop in Quality of Life to 2020, End of Civilization by 2040. Now, that's kind of interesting because there are all ththese people, the Ray Kurzweils and all this other stuff that talk about achieving the singularity. What was the headline on Time a number of years ago was 2045, the year man becomes immortal.
Yeah.
I think is what the title of it was. And so then here's an MIT model, computer model called, I think it's called World One, saying that things really are kind of deteriorating and they're collapsing. And it does seem like we're past the tipping point. And it's hard, Tony, I don't want to be the bearer of bad news. I want to be the bearer of truth.
Yeah.
I think people need to understand what's going on. And I had a lady, she contacted me yesterday, or time seems to be stretched out and compressed all at the same time now. So it's hard to remember exactly when I got these emails, particularly today when I've had like a 250 email day plus a lot of phone calls. So it's hard, but she can see the world changing. And she's very, very upset. She doesn't know what to do. I think she's paying attention, and she can see that certain things are collapsing. And she's like, I'm freaking out. I don't know if I want to live in a world like this. And when's the Lord going to come? And I don't know the answer to that. I do know I think we live at a very significant time of biblical human history. I do think, I've talked about this for years, things are converging. They seem to come closer and closer. I've been doing these prophecy updates in some fashion for over 20 years now. I used to just do it for a class at a church that might be 15 people or 100 people. So didn't have much reach, and nobody knew who I was. But people, I think, see this converging now. They're paying attention, and it's very easy to lose hope. And one verse that I have relied on quite a lot, I know that Jewish prophecy, eschatology, is often patterned. So what was going on in the religious world of Jesus' time will be recapitulated. It will be what's going on when he comes back the second time, because the first time is a pattern for the second time. And so when Jesus came the first time, he fulfilled a bunch of Bible prophecy. I've often cited a statistic that about 60% of the messianic prophecies that were fulfilled at Jesus' first coming were fulfilled in the last week of his life. So that I think is a pattern for how it will be, that we'll see a little bit fulfilled or start to be fulfilled here and there. And then it'll be just like a giant flood of prophecy being fulfilled just before the second coming of Christ. But when the disciples, Jesus started teaching in parables, and in Matthew chapter 13, he told his disciples this, and I think this is something that we should take as encouragement for us, as to consider the times in which we live. And it says this: but blessed are your eyes, for they see, and your ears, for they hear. Because what happened was, we know the Pharisees and all of these other people, they didn't get it. They were looking for something else. I think they had their eschatology figured out, but it wasn't quite right. They had kind of got locked into it's going to happen in a certain particular way with the Messiah coming, and they missed it. But some people realized, oh wait, this is really how this is all supposed to work out. And so Jesus says, blessed are your eyes, for they see, and your ears, for they hear. For verily I say unto you that many prophets and righteous men have desired to see those things which ye see, and have not seen them, and to hear those things which ye hear, and have not heard them. So I think you need to, rather than focus on, gee, it's bad out there, it's awful, things aren't working out quite the way that we thought, life is changing, and it may not be very pleasant. Jesus said, maybe you should consider yourself blessed that you're actually seeing all these things come about and that you understand what's happening. Now, it doesn't necessarily make it any easier, but you need to understand that this is the way it's going to be.
The thing is that so many people, though, even in Christian circles, are not even taking any notice at all. They're just asleep with their heads buried in the sand and not even aware of what's going on. I drove about an hour's drive to a city, about an hour away, called Palmerston North, which is, I think, about 80,000 people live there. This was on the weekend, to listen to Indran Malvaganam, who I've had on the show once before, and I'm going to get him back, talking about faith and hope in perilous times. And it was a brilliant discussion, a presentation, what he brought out. But in a city of 80,000 people, only a handful of people were there to listen to what everyone should have been.
When you say a handful, what
30,
do you mean by
around about 30 people, I would say.
Yep.
And this, it was in a church building, a community church building, and he put so much effort into preparing this. And anyway, I'll get him to share the same basic information on the Minute to Midnight show. But I just went there and thought, this just shows you how asleep everyone is. If he'd put on a seminar about how to get rich quick, or how God wants to bless you and prosper you, imagine how many people would have been there. But this is the thing that bothers me, is that Christians are asleep mostly. I mean, people that listen to you or listen to us are the awake ones, but really it's the small minority.
Well, I mean, look at the example that I used of Willow Creek. I mean, we know that Willow Creek, it's falling apart. Now, I've had a lot to say about Willow Creek over the years. I believe that deception and apostasy, that's one of the most significant harbingers that we live in the end times. And so the Willow Creek organization, along with some others, but Willow Creek mainly, set up a network of churches, and they pushed the seeker-sensitive nonsense on people.
Yeah.
That we really can't talk about the tough stuff. We have to be happy clappy. Can I give you a quick example? I know a church. My father was a pastor. He knew the pastor of that church. I know the man who became a pastor, and he's a good man. I have no doubts about his salvation or that type of thing. But the Willow Creek Association came in, and it overwhelmed what I thought was good, sound Bible teaching. And so I ran into somebody on a golf course one day, and I was pretty clear that I figured out almost immediately where they went to church. And I asked him, I said, what does your pastor talk about? Does he talk about the end times or anything like this? And I know that he used to. No, it's usually 5, points on how to be a better husband or a better worker, or to be a better person, and that type of thing. And I got on their website, and I'm not trying to run this church down. There's good people there, but they were doing a series on real life lessons from superheroes.
Yeah.
Batman, first week Superman, then Spider-Man, then Batman, I think were the 3 weeks. And I'm thinking, like, how did we get here? Well, we got here because of Willow Creek. But look at what Willow Creek did. In fact, Jerry, my friend who blogs, Grandma Jerry, she wrote an article today on Andy Stanley's upcoming conference. They're charging $269. They're holding it in an arena in the Atlanta area that seats 13,000 people. Now, I don't know how many people they'll get. Willow Creek recently, even in the midst of all these scandals involving Bill Hybels and their elders resigning and their administrative pastor and lead pastor resigning, they held the Global Leadership Summit. On their website, they were saying that they were expecting attendance this year of 465,000 people at the Global Leadership Summit. And and people try to tell me it's not connected to Willow Creek, but they were charging $239. Now, when you run those numbers, and let's say they subsidize other countries with the 100 and some thousand, okay, fine, that's fine. That still means that conference is bringing in somewhere between $30 and $90 million.
Yes, yeah. That's crazy, isn't it, really?
And then you have somebody who puts on good Bible teaching. And I've been to these too, people who are superb Bible teachers out in California and everything. And they'll have 100 people, or
Yeah.
they'll have 5 people show up.
I know, it's just so back to front. But but again, it just shows you that people are asleep and people don't really have a hunger for truth. They have a hunger to have their itching ears basically tickled, really, with things that they want to hear rather than it being the truth. And oh boy, well, I guess our time's pretty much running out. We could go into so many more things, like just looking into Hillsong and some of the
Yeah.
stuff,
Well, look at the big conference. Listen. I mean, look what happened the other day in the United States. The report from the Attorney General of Pennsylvania came out. He convened a grand jury, and for 2 years, these people sat through what had to be some of the most disturbing, horrific testimony about how Roman Catholic priests had abused young boys, mostly boys, but also young girls. They took pornographic pictures of them. They figured out they targeted people who didn't have a father at the home in the home, and then when they found out they found someone that they could abuse, they would give them jewelry so that other Catholic priests would know this one is one that you can have your way with. It's sick. It's disgusting on an epic scale.
Yeah.
And the response, the head of the Catholic League, the response has been so tone deaf, Tony. It's unbelievable. The Pope comes out, oh yeah, we don't agree. I don't care whether you agree with it or not. Fire somebody for crying out loud.
Yeah.
You're like, well, we're going to have a meeting with one of these cardinals from that area in a week or so. Okay, have a meeting with him, but fire him today.
Yeah.
Get rid of him today. It's unbelievable, but this goes on, and it's hard for people to get your head around the scale and scope of what's happened. I mean, they said, over 300 priests and 1,000 victims. The victim numbers are very low. That it's very hard. As a lawyer, I know a little bit about prosecuting cases. It is very, very hard to prosecute child sex abuse cases because of getting a witness that could come in and testify, that would be willing to come in and testify. This report, 2 years of investigation, I have doubts whether this report will lead to any indictments. I will be surprised if there's 10 indictments out of this. I will be shocked. But that doesn't mean that it hasn't gone on and that there's a problem.
Yeah.
But people don't want to hear about that. And I've often said
So just
the Vatican should pay.
and like I say, we're about in an hour now, so we'll have to look at wrapping it up. But just before we do, you mentioned the word indictment, so I thought I'm going to have to ask you now. What do you think about all this supposed talk of all these indictments coming out against people through the Trump administration taking down?
Did you ask me that because you thought I wasn't getting enough hate mail already? Is that?
Look, you're in the legal field, so I know I've talked to you about this before, but that was months and months ago. So what are your current thoughts?
Well, look, when we talked about this last year, I think the number was about 8,000 sealed indictments ready to be dropped anytime soon.
Yeah.
The number is now over 40,000. I will tell you this. I have looked into the data. I have looked into the search methodology. My conclusion, and I'm a pretty rational, level-headed guy. First, let me just say this. I hope it's true. I don't want evil people, criminals to walk free. I don't. But I also have to use reason when I analyze things. I know how hard it is to get an indictment. Example A would be the Attorney General of Pennsylvania report that just came out. They spent 2 years investigating this. It will likely lead to as I said, if it leads to 10 indictments, I'll be shocked. So for that number of sealed indictments to go from 8,000 late last year to over 40,000 now.
Let's call them alleged indictments. Just
yeah,
so, yeah.
The data's fly. In fact, I've taken the list. They've come up with lists of case numbers. I have personally gone through a random sampling of somewhere approaching 200 of the cases. There's a system called Pacer, and it's public, and you get a password and everything. And I have it because I practice in federal court. And I can tell you that I've looked at 200 cases and I think that maybe 4 of them were even a criminal case. There are sealed filings that go on all the time, civil cases now. I think that leads to a skewing of the numbers. I said, I hope it's true, but I also know what it takes to get an indictment. I've worked in one of the largest fraud cases ever prosecuted in the history of the United States. And I know that in that case, they ended up with about 13 people being indicted. It took 3.5 years. And that was with like 5 of the people ended up being indicted cooperating with the government. It took 3.5 years. There were millions of documents to review, somewhere around 40 million pages of things. So I'm just saying is for them to be the federal system, which has I think it has 8,000 lawyers working for the federal government in the U.S. attorney's offices. They're doing all kinds of other cases. To get 150 indictments a day, 7 days a week for almost a year, I just don't think it's possible. It's not possible. If it was happening, Tony, there would be tremendous buzz in the legal community. Look what happens in the investigation with the Trump people. Every time somebody gets drug in front of a grand jury, everybody knows about it. People lawyer up, lawyers talk to other lawyers. If there were 40,000 grand jury investigations that resulted in that many indictments, and remember, indictments can have anywhere from 8 to 15 to 20, 25 defendants. If there were that many people under investigation with grand juries going on and people lawyering up, there would be a buzz in the legal community about it like you've never seen. And I can tell you, I mentioned it to one of my white collar partners the other day, and I showed him the stories. Do you think? And he goes, I haven't heard anything about this. Nobody knows what's going on. So that kind of leads me to the conclusion that I think the number is vastly overstated. Look, I hope they get bad people. I'm all for it, but I just think the number is. Yeah, I thought it was skewed at 5,000. Yeah. I knew it was skewed at 8,000. I'm pretty sure it's skewed at 40,000. But look, if I'm wrong, I'll say mea culpa. And like I said, I'm all for bringing these people down. But for that to go on in the Trump administration, in our DOJ, and our government, and with its deep state actors and that type of thing, I think it's a number that's
nonsense.
That's the blunt way of saying it. Yeah. And I think it's playing on people's desire that something happened.
Yeah. And meanwhile, things are getting worse, and people are holding on to this false hope that the Trump administration is weeding out all the bad guys. And that's what I see. It's a false hope. We're in a reprieve because Mark Taylor told us we have. So and Lance Wall now. So everything's getting better, folks. Don't worry about it. Which is completely the opposite to what's really happening.
And I see good level-headed people passing that number around, and normally good level-headed people passing that number around, but I just don't think it comports with reality. and I think this is a perfect example of what people will latch on to avoid the reality of the situation.
Yeah, and that pretty much sums it up. Well, I guess we better look at wrapping up here anyway now, John.
Okay.
But yeah, this has been an awesome discussion, and you know, I'll be coming back to you in a few weeks, going, "Hey, John, can we talk about something I've watched on your prophecy update or whatever?"
Yeah, or can we actually talk about something that we talked about talking about?
Yeah, but no, we never run out of things, do we? So it's been absolutely an awesome discussion again.
Thank you, Tony. God bless.
And God bless you too. Thanks, John. Our website is aminutetomidnight.com, and you can find all of our shows and articles there. You can also find our shows on iTunes as well as YouTube. And don't forget to click the like button on our videos and join our forum. We have a community forum on the website aminutetomidnight.com, which you're welcome to join. And we also have an A Minute to Midnight Facebook group, which you can join too. We run A Minute to Midnight entirely by donations, and you can donate on our website as well. And we really say thank you, a big thank you to the people that do donate to us, because we could not keep this running without your help. And we feel really blessed and honoured by the people that do actually donate. It's an awesome thing to know that these people support us. And we thank you for listening and just being supportive in your comments and things as well. It's a real blessing and an encouragement to us, and I hope we encourage you all as well. I think that's probably about it. Apart from the last thing is the music. I write, play and record all the music, and you can find free music on our website if you want to download it. So that's it for this show. We will catch you in a few days' time with another exciting episode of the A Minute to Midnight Show. Have a great week and God bless.